I handed a judge a flash drive and said, "These are my daddy issues. Has your father ever threatened you and your mom like this?" The first time my father said, "or else," he didn't even raise his voice, and that's how I knew it was real. We were standing in his kitchen under these bright white lights that made everything look like a hospital, and he was drying a wine glass with these slow, careful movements like he was polishing something fragile. Except the thing he was polishing was me. He told me the custody hearing was next week. He told me I was old enough now to decide where I wanted to live. Then he looked at me with that soft, patient expression he used when he wanted to seem like a reasonable person, and said I would be telling the judge I wanted to live with him full time. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt tight. I said I didn't know. He smiled. He stepped closer. He put the wine glass down gently on the counter and said, "You do what I say, or else." He didn't explain it straight away. He just let the silence stretch until it started pressing against my ears. Then he told me what "or else" meant. He said my mom would lose the house. He said he'd make sure she never worked again. He said he'd expose things about her that nobody else knew. He said judges were tired of unstable mothers and that he'd already spoken to people who agreed with him. He said all of this calmly like he was explaining a math problem. I just stood there trying to remember how to breathe. He reached out and adjusted the collar of my shirt like I was a doll. He said, "You're not a child anymore. Real men protect their futures." I couldn't sleep that night at all. I just lay there staring at the ceiling in fear and confusion. The next morning he made pancakes and posted a photo of us smiling at the kitchen table. He captioned it with something about rebuilding a family. By the time I got back to my mom's house that Sunday night, 3 relatives had already texted me saying they were glad my dad was stepping up and appreciating family. My mom opened the door and hugged me so tight I almost broke down right there. She asked if everything had been okay. I said yes, because if I said no, it would shatter something in her face that I didn't think she could afford to lose. She had already been served with another motion from his lawyer that week, claiming she was emotionally unstable. I had overheard her on the phone with her attorney in the bathroom with the door locked. I heard the way her voice cracked when she said, "He's trying to take him from me." I pressed my hand against the door and felt like I was the only thing holding the house up. The next weekend at my father's house, he showed me printed emails between his lawyer and someone else. He said they were building a case. He told me the judge would want to know where I felt safe. He asked me if I felt safe with a mother who regularly cried in bathrooms and always displayed erratic, unpredictable behavior. He said it lightly, almost like he felt bad about it. Then he leaned closer and said, "If you don't help me, she will collapse, and that will be on you." I kept sleeping badly after that and was developing weird habits and a mild version of OCD. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation. I started questioning small things. Was my mom more fragile than I thought? Did she forget things? Did she lose her temper more than I remembered? Was she kind of crazy? Every time I hesitated, his voice filled in the gaps. He started calling me every night during the weeks I stayed with my mom. He said he just wanted to check in. Then he'd ask what she had done that day. Did she seem tired? Did she mention money? Did she raise her voice or have a crying fit? I always said as little as possible because I didn't want to be any more stuck in the middle than I already was. The questions seemed casual, but they stacked up like bricks. One night he told me to start recording arguments. I said we didn't have arguments. He said, "You will." Next time I was at his house, he rehearsed lines with me at the dining table like we were practicing for a play. He said the custody evaluator would ask how I felt living with my mom. He told me to say I felt anxious. He told me to say she relied on me emotionally. He told me to say I worried about her stability. I told him that wasn't true. He reached across the table and squeezed my wrist so hard I felt my pulse jump under his fingers. He didn't yell. He just held it there and said, "Truth is flexible. Survival isn't." When I pulled away, he let go instantly and leaned back in his chair, all calm again like nothing happened. He asked me if I wanted to end up in a small apartment with my mom working 2 jobs living on peanut butter and ramen. He asked if I wanted to watch her fail because I was too weak to speak up. The way he said it made it feel like I was choosing between destroying her slowly or destroying her quickly. At school, my guidance counselor called me in one afternoon and asked how things were at home. I could tell she had already heard something. My dad had emailed her expressing concern about my stress levels. He said he was worried my mom was putting too much emotional pressure on me. I felt my face burn, but I kept my voice steady. I said everything was fine. She gave me this long look like she wasn't buying it. That night, my dad texted me asking how the meeting went. I didn't even remember telling him about it. He followed up with, "Remember what we discussed?" I started feeling watched, even when I wasn't. He kept escalating slowly, always just enough to keep me off balance. One weekend, he took my phone after dinner and said I needed a break from distractions. He locked it in his office drawer. When I asked for it back, he said privileges were earned. Later that night, he came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. He told me he knew I was scared. He said that was normal. He said he was the only one thinking long-term about my future. Then he told me if I refused to cooperate, he'd file an emergency motion claiming my mom had been drinking way too much. I knew she hadn't, but the way he said it made it sound like the evidence already existed. He described how humiliating it would be for her to defend herself against something like that. He described how neighbors would talk. He described how fast reputations could fall apart. I felt my chest tighten. He asked me if I loved her. I said yes. He nodded and said, "Then do the right thing." The court case was coming up fast and I was anxious beyond belief. I still had no idea what I was going to do. I hated that I was being forced to choose, but I felt way worse for my poor mom. The following week, my mom missed one of my soccer games because she was stuck in traffic after working late. My dad showed up instead with a camera and a loud cheer. He hugged me afterward in front of everyone and said he was proud of me for staying strong through difficult circumstances. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was building contrast in public. Later, he texted extended family saying he was concerned about my mom's reliability. I watched people start looking at her differently. I felt trapped in a story I didn't write. One night at his house, I refused to practice testimony. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. He walked over to the wall next to me and punched it hard enough to leave a dent inches from my head. The sound rang in my ears. He turned slowly and looked at me with something almost disappointed in his eyes. He said, "Do not make me your enemy. I am doing this for your well-being." I realized right then that he already was my enemy. My grades started slipping because I couldn't focus on anything. I felt like I was betraying one parent no matter what I I did. If I lied, I destroyed my mom. If I told the truth, I risked setting him off completely. The custody interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The night before, he called and told me he had already drafted a statement claiming my mom had episodes of instability. He said all he needed was my confirmation. He said if I contradicted him, he'd go for sole custody and cut her visitation completely. He said it with so much certainty that it felt like it was already decided. I hung up and sat in my room staring at the wall. My mom knocked softly and asked if I wanted tea. She smiled when I opened the door, even though I could see how exhausted she was. She told me no matter what happened, she loved me more than anything. I almost told her everything. The words rose up in my throat, but then I pictured my father in that kitchen under those bright lights saying, "Or else," and I swallowed it back down. I lay awake that night, convinced that by morning I'd have to choose which parent to sacrifice. The morning of the custody interview felt like walking towards something I couldn't come back from. I woke up before my alarm and just lay there staring at the wall, listening to my mom moving around in the kitchen making me breakfast. The soft clink of a mug against the counter. The normal sounds of a normal life that suddenly felt fragile enough to shatter if I breathed wrong. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from my father. "Remember who protects you." No emoji, no punctuation, no warmth, just pressure. I typed nothing back. My hands were shaking too hard. When I walked into the kitchen, my mom smiled at me like she was trying to hold the world together with that expression alone. She asked if I slept okay. I lied and said yes. She told me the evaluator just wanted honesty. She said, "You don't have to protect me." Those words hit like a punch because protecting her was the only thing I knew how to do anymore. In the car on the way there, I watched houses blur past and tried to figure out whether being brave meant telling the truth or surviving long enough to tell it later. My father was already in the lobby when we got there wearing a navy suit and that controlled, almost peaceful expression he put on for authority figures. He knelt down slightly when he saw me and put a hand on my shoulder in a way that looked affectionate to anyone watching. His fingers pressed just a little too hard into my collarbone. "You've got this," he said softly. "Don't sabotage your future and ruin her life. It's up to you, pal." He said pal so casually like there wasn't a ton of venom behind it. I could feel my pulse in my throat. The evaluator called me to the back room alone. The office smelled like coffee and paper. She spoke gently. She asked me how I felt at home. My mind filled with all the rehearsed lines my father had drilled into me. Anxious, responsible for my mom's emotions, worried about stability. The words were just sitting there ready to go like weapons. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I thought about the dent in the wall next to my head. I thought about my mom crying in the bathroom. I thought about my father's voice explaining how reputations could crumble and how hard he worked to make me terrified of everything. I said I felt caught in the middle. It was the smallest truth I could manage. The evaluator nodded and asked if anyone had coached me on what to say. My stomach dropped. I heard my father's warning playing in my head. "Do not make me your enemy." I hesitated long enough for it to matter. She wrote something down. When I walked out, my father searched my face for clues. I gave him nothing. That night at his house, he didn't yell. That was worse. He asked how it went. I said fine. He watched me for a long moment, then said the evaluator had already called his lawyer and asked about potential coaching. My blood went cold. He stepped closer. "What did you say?" It wasn't a question. It was a blade. I told him I hadn't lied. He stared at me like he was recalculating something. Then he nodded slowly and said, "Okay." The calm lasted until midnight. He came into my room without knocking and flipped the light on. He said he had just finished drafting an emergency motion. He said he was going to claim my mom had been emotionally manipulating me to turn me against him. He said he had enough evidence to make it stick. He told me if she lost custody entirely, it would be because I had been weak. My stomach churned. I told him to stop. My voice cracked on the word. He leaned down so we were eye level. "You think you're protecting her?" he whispered. "You are the one destroying her." After he left, I sat there in the light he'd left on and felt something inside me shift from fear to something sharper. I realized he wasn't reacting to strength. He was reacting to uncertainty. He needed control more than he needed love. He needed to keep a grip on the story, and stories could be exposed. The next day, while he was in the shower, I went into his office. I had never dared before. My hands were dripping with sweat as I opened his laptop. He never logged out. Being arrogant made him sloppy. I searched his email. I found threads with his lawyer outlining pressure strategies. I found a draft statement describing my mom as unstable before any evaluation had even happened. I found a message he wrote but never sent that. Said, "If he doesn't comply, we escalate." I took photos of everything with my phone, being super careful not to move the screen. Then I opened his cloud storage and found something worse. A folder labeled leverage. Inside were screenshots of private text messages my mom had sent him months ago during mediation. Vulnerable messages about money and stress that he had saved to use against her. I felt sick. He didn't just want custody. He wanted to destroy her completely. I copied what I could onto a flash drive I had in my backpack. My hands were shaking the entire time. When I heard the shower turn off, I shut the laptop and walked out like I had never been there. That night, he told me he had scheduled another meeting with his lawyer. He said he might request a psychological evaluation for my mom. He said it casually, like he was talking about what to have for dinner. I nodded and went to my room and started building my own file. I organized the photos. I wrote down dates of every threat. I recorded our next conversation when he repeated that I was responsible for her survival. The more evidence I gathered, the less my fear felt like I was frozen, and the more it felt like fuel. The next hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In that time, he went harder than ever. Every second I spent with him, I was walking on burning eggshells. He started calling my mom late at night from unknown numbers and hanging up. He emailed her employer anonymously questioning her reliability and mental health. He sent me articles about sons who regretted choosing the wrong parent. He told me regret lasted forever. But now, I was watching him differently. I saw how he paced when things didn't go exactly how he planned. I saw how he refreshed his email obsessively. I saw how his calm cracked at the edges when he could feel me pulling away. The day before the hearing, he cornered me again in the kitchen under those same bright lights. He asked me one final time where my loyalty was. I looked at him and the fear was still there, but it wasn't running the show anymore. I said my loyalty was to the truth. His jaw tightened. He told me I had no idea what I was doing. He said I was about to learn about life life the hard way, and that I was digging my mom's grave and my own. The next morning in court, I carried the flash drive in my pocket like it was a live wire. My mom squeezed my hand before I went in to speak again. She didn't know what I was carrying. Unlike my father, she trusted me completely and never once put any pressure on me either way. I loved her for that. My father watched me with that steady, measuring look he always had. When the judge asked if I had anything further to add, I said yes. My voice shook at first, but I kept going. I explained that I had been coached. I described the threats without exaggerating anything. I handed over the flash drive and said it contained emails and recordings. The courtroom felt like it tilted. My father stood up immediately objecting, calling it some big manipulation scheme. But the judge looked at him differently now. The evaluator asked for the materials. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. My father tried to pivot, tried to charm, tried to frame it as a misunderstanding and a misinterpretation. But the words in his own emails contradicted everything he was saying. The phrase pressure strategies was read out loud. I watched his composure crack for the first time. It wasn't explosive. It was subtle, a tightening around his eyes, a slight shake in his hand. The mask was slipping. The judge ordered an investigation into coercion and potential parental alienation. Supervised visitation, only pending review. My mom started crying silently. She realized the pressure I had been under and felt horrible for me. I felt like I had stepped off a cliff and landed on solid ground. When we walked out of the courtroom, my father didn't look at me. He walked past us like we were strangers. In the weeks after that, the whole story fell apart publicly. His emails were entered into the record. His tactics were documented. The extended family who had believed him went quiet and stopped talking to him. My mom stood a little taller and stronger every day. At home, the air felt different, lighter. I still felt a flash of fear sometimes when my phone buzzed, but it didn't own me anymore. The last time I saw him before supervised visits were set up, he leaned close and said I would regret humiliating him. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You're a weak little man and you don't scare me anymore." He trembled. The truth hurt. I turned my back on him and walked away like he was the stranger now. And for the first time since he said, "or else," I understood that the threat only worked when I accepted it.